Hi, I'm Elizabeth, this is the Bookish North and I'm here today with another weekly reading video, the 7th in a row. I'm kind of happy with that, managed to actually make a habit of this. I'm here today in my favourite t-shirt. I mean, it feels very apt for me and the content you've seen from me recently. I mean, a book haul. But yeah, I'm home, I'm back to work, which has been okay. I mean, clearly not as great as lounging around in London parks and bookshops, but it's been okay, and I have actually read a lot more this week than I thought I would, which I'm happy about. Granted, I have deliberately chosen some shorter books off of my haul to feel accomplished this week, but I mean, I have managed to finish 4 books, so that's good. I'm gonna do this in the order of least enjoyed to most enjoyed because I want to end on a high note, so not the order I read them in this week. The first one I want to mention is that I did finish an audiobook. I'm not going to talk about that. It was a business book that I listened to, you know, improve my work persona. I didn't particularly like it. I think, for one thing, I felt it was like misplaced in the business section. It should be like more traditional self-help, and yeah, didn't think it was any good. I'm not gonna go any further into that, but let's get to the physical books. I also read The Swan in the Evening by Rosamund Lehman, which is a memoir. And sadly, I did not get on with this at all. It just was a book that contained too many of the things I don't like to read about. I think for other people this might be a good fit. For me, it just wasn't it. Like the first third of the book is childhood memories, and that's usually my least favorite part of a memoir. It depends a bit on how it's written, but here they are just presented one after another after another. There's no context, there's no reflection, and I'm just left not understanding why she's telling me this stuff that she is telling me and leaving out the rest. I mean, there's no reason for why these particular scenes are in the book. And then they all seem to have sort of the same weight. They just seem like random snapshots from her childhood, and even if some of them are fairly dramatic or traumatic events, they're told like in the exact same way as like perfectly mundane stuff. So you have like finding a dead bird and seeing it filled with maggots, next to being watching a boat race, next to finding the corpse of a man in the river, next to looking at paintings at the library. I mean, all have the same weight and they're just positioned next to each other, and I couldn't really make much sense of it, and to be honest, I found that first part of the book just dull. And the only reason I continued on was because I usually don't really enjoy the childhood part of memoirs, so I wanted to see if I enjoyed the adult part of this more. Then she went on to talk about her writing for just a little bit, like 10-15 pages, and I haven't read any of her novels. I have to admit I was a bit curious about her first one after reading this, so I might look into that at one point. But then she goes on to talk about her daughter Sally. And Sally died of polio when she was only 24. And when Rosamund Lehman talks about the grief she felt when her daughter passed away, that felt raw, and I mean, that felt like something that mattered to her, and that was my favorite part of the book. That was something worth reading. Then she goes on sort of a spiritual journey because she's convinced that her daughter comes back to her and they are communicating, and she is convinced that people don't disappear when they die, they just exist on a different level of existence, some ethereal place or body or whatever, and yeah, so that's the last part of this book, she talking about her digging into literature about this and about her own personal experiences of this kind of spirituality, and about how she is still in communication with her dead daughter. And I guess I'm just too much of a skeptic to be susceptible for that kind of writing. I wish I could believe it. It would make a lot of things easier, but I just can't. And like overall, for me, this book was just a miss. So, I mean, if you're more into the spiritual stuff, you might get more out of this than I did. But yeah, for me, not so much. But I did read other things this week that I did enjoy, and among them was At the Pond, Swimming at the Hampstead Ladies' Pond. And this is a collection of essays written by like a bunch of different female writers. So this, I mean, the word I feel most apt describing this is charming, and that to me sounds kind of condescending, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a compliment, because this is a very charming, good-natured book that I enjoyed reading. There are several like vantage points here. You see the swimming in the ladies' pond from a lot of different people, a lot of different women, some which are like British born, some are immigrants. One of them is a trans woman. So you get a lot of different perspectives. The book is divided into 4 sections, one for each season. So you've got winter, spring, summer and autumn. Yeah, they're sorted into what kind of weather they're talking about, I guess. I enjoyed some of these more than others, as is usual in the collection. I think for me, I particularly enjoyed some of the first ones where they talked very much about the physical sensation of being in water, and that's the winter part of the book. So it's the women who are swimming all through winter when the water gets really cold, and they talk about how that physical sensation feels on your body. And I have never swum at those kinds of temperatures. I have gone swimming in the mountains where, you know, it's below 10 degrees Celsius, I think, but you know, not the pushing the ice out of the way kind of temperatures, but still, I really enjoyed reading about that. And I feel that this book is sort of filled with a nostalgia for something that, I mean, does still exist, but they have this kind of, the way they're talking about this pond. And if you don't know, at Hampstead Heath there are 3 swimming ponds. One is for women only, one is for men only, and then there's one mixed pond. And you know, this is obviously about the women's pond. And I really like how they talk about this place as something special, because it's a place for women only, and they talk about this sort of atmosphere there and the camaraderie between the women who are swimming there, particularly the ones who swim all year around. And you get the feeling that this is a special place, and they all talk about water and the feeling of being submerged in water, and water sort of lifting you up or holding you or cleansing you. A lot of them sort of touch upon more pagan stuff about springs and water, and the way water has meant different things throughout life. Yeah, I enjoyed reading this. I particularly enjoyed reading it right now after I actually swam in the pond myself while I was in London. To me, some of this feels kind of alien, just because they're talking about this experience of swimming in the pond as wild swimming, as opposed to swimming in a swimming pool, I guess. But for me, I mean, swimming in the Hampstead Ladies' Pond was one of the most organized kind of swimming I have ever done, most organized and supervised. There were, like, you have a stair to go down, a stair to go up. There were 3 lifeguards on duty watching us, and then there are these floating devices all through the lake so you can take breaks if you're tired. So you know, for someone used to swimming in a lake, this didn't feel all that wild. But anyways, I did enjoy the book. I did enjoy swimming in the pond, and yeah, quite an enjoyable read. And then the final book I have finished this week was the first book I finished this week, and it kind of is what started the reading week, where I read a lot more than I thought I would, because I jumped straight into Before Mars by Emma Newman. Sort of become obsessed with this Planetfall series by now. I read Planetfall and After Atlas while I was in London, and I just couldn't wait to get on with it. And even though I really liked the first two books, this is clearly now my favorite. I absolutely adored this book. So when Planetfall is set on a planet far away where humans have started a colony, and then After Atlas is set 40 years after those people left Earth, and it's about 3 days before a time capsule that they left behind is to be opened. And then Before Mars is set at the same time as After Atlas, but we are on Mars, where a woman called Anna is arriving to be part of a research colony with 4 other people who are living on Mars to do scientific research. And Anna is sent there only secondarily to do scientific research. She is first and foremost an artist, and she's sent there by the man who owns the rights to any activity on Mars to paint pictures of Mars that he is going to sell for a lot of money, because they will be pictures of Mars painted on the Martian surface, and so they will be very special and very unique. So that's why she's going. And then when she arrives, she finds in her cabin a note written by herself, a warning, and she can't remember having written it, and she can't imagine how it has ended up in the room because she's never been there before. And that kind of starts off this journey where she's trying to figure out what the hell is happening. Something is off. Is it off, or is it just in her head? And this was super exciting, even though I very early on understood what was going on, primarily because I have read the previous books, but also I didn't care that I had a very clear idea of what was going on, and I was right in that, but I wanted to follow her journey figuring it out, and that was, I just couldn't put the book down. I was supposed to do other things this week, but when I came home from work, I started reading, and I read until I went to bed. And then when I came home from work the next day, I had my dinner, and then I read this book until I had finished it. I mean, there were really no other options. I really like how Emma Newman has these plot-driven, exciting books without them running off at breakneck speed. And I like how she has like these things from the past gradually being revealed alongside the plot. So you got like 2 things just converging towards an endpoint and really driving the story ahead. And then I also really like how the characters, or how the main characters of her stories are imperfect humans. And I feel like there are so many sci-fi books where the main characters are superhuman. They can do anything, and whatever situation you put them into, they will come out of it ahead, and they will solve the puzzle at the very last second and then go on to something else, and they will meet another hurdle that's even bigger than the one they've faced, but they will somehow get past that as well. And this is just not like that, because the characters that carry these stories are faulty human beings. I mean, they have issues, they have things that has happened to them in the past that are still shaping who they are. they have mental health issues. In this one, I mean, Anna has PTSD from something she experienced in her childhood, and she also has postnatal depression. And just that makes them more relatable, more believable, and it adds something to the story. And I found this to be absolutely heartbreaking. It chewed me up and spit me out in pieces, and I'm so regretting that I didn't buy the fourth book in London as well. So I've been waiting to read it all weekend. I guess I could have bought it on a Kindle to be able to read it, but I think I'm going to Oslo tomorrow to buy the fourth and final book so far in this, because I just need to know how this ends. And any plans I had of not buying any more books in the forthcoming months will lose out to my urge to finish off this series. And then I have also started a new book. I started How Words Work, You Are Not Human by Simon Lancaster. This is a book about metaphor and how we use metaphor to dehumanize people, and how we then are capable of doing horrific things. And I feel like this is a very timely book to be reading in the current political climate. Simon Lancaster is a speechwriter, and he is writing really well. I think I've read the first 3 chapters, or the introduction and the first 2 chapters. And he has this sweeping way of pulling you through long periods of times and putting things next to each other so you see connections that I kind of hadn't drawn myself, which I really like. He writes in a very engaging style, and yeah, it's a very accessible read, and so far I am really enjoying his writing and the journeys he has been taking me on. The only thing is that I have at 2 occasions so far found sort of factual faults in what he's saying, and that makes me a bit dubious about the rest of the stuff he's writing as well, because if those things are like inaccurate or even wrong, then can I really trust the other things he's saying? Let me just give you an example. He's talking about trolls and how Russians are now often called trolls, like internet trolls, and he's saying the original idea of trolls actually dates back to 14th century Norse mythology. It's like 14th century Norse mythology? I mean, by the 14th century, Norse mythology was no longer really a thing, because the places where that were the religion were by now Christian, and well, you have a folklore that has developed from Norse mythology, and you know, that's where trolls come into the picture. And then he goes on to use an example from Hans Christian Andersen, the Danish writer who wrote fairy tales, but you know, those fairy tales are like artistic fairy tales. They're not part of the folklore. So it just feels odd reading stuff like this, and that makes me a bit distrustful to other things he's saying as well. But overall, I am really enjoying the writing in the book. I think it's very engaging, and it is making me see things I haven't thought about and see connections I hadn't drawn myself. And you know, I am going to give the book the benefit of the doubt and continue on, because yeah, it is very engaging, and I think I can get a lot from it, even if it's not always 100% accurate, I guess. And so that's what I'm currently reading, and I'm sure I'm gonna pick up something more by the time I'm talking to you again next week. Probably Atlas Alone by Newman will be in here. I don't think I can keep away from that book another week, to be honest. And apart from that, I don't really have any plans for what else I will read. I have piles and piles of books, so I'll just see what screams my name when I finish this one. And yeah, I hope you're having a good reading week, and I would love to hear from you if you have read any of these books or plan to read any of these books. And until next time, bye bye.